a position that was so generously funded by the Patterson Foundation and has been funded for the last several years that help us work through these projects. So we are eternally grateful. And having a person and persons that can work on this it's a highly specific trained skill. So to be able to keep that person over time was really helpful. So we're very, very grateful. Thank you, Laura, for reminding me.
Okay, good morning. It's great to see all of you this morning. And today we're going to talk a little bit about graduation success and the unique things that we do in Sarasota County to monitor for graduation success for all of our students. First, I want to say that we'll talk in just a moment about the amazing champions at the school level who are working through this, but I also want to acknowledge our district support as well, who are champions. So starting, of course, with Mr. Cantis, our Executive Director for Secondary Schools, Middle Schools, and High Schools. We'll talk about the middle school monitoring as well as high school monitoring today. Also, I want to recognize Rodney Davidson. He's not in the room today, but he is a supervisor in state reports who this data is all attributable to his amazing work and his attention to detail. Lisa Lyon, she's our dropout prevention coordinator and specialist, rather. She's in the room today. And then, of course, I work with Victoria Klein, who is an administrative assistant in our office, and she's an amazing champion as well. So we are really excited to talk about graduation rate. Today we'll be looking at this from an aerial view of about 50,000 feet because there's so many moving pieces to it. But what we really want you to walk away with is the vision that we have and some of the pieces that we have in place to monitor graduation success with Project 10. So what is Project 10? It's a system of supports that is grounded in research to support the learner across all environments when they are in our buildings and also even in some cases when they're not inside of our buildings, providing them what they need. It started as a framework with the Florida Department of Education, where they were years ago initially looking at our special students with IEPs, our ESC students. Here in Sarasota County, being the innovative district that we are, the decision was made to let's look at Project 10 learners. At this point, we are monitoring our high school students from the moment they enter high school as ninth graders through graduation success. We know that graduation just doesn't occur their last semester as a senior. And I'm really proud to report that, again, the innovation in Sarasota County has led us to this year monitoring all of our middle school students in the sixth grade for graduation success as well, making sure that they're meeting those benchmarks to be able to be a successful graduate at the end of their tenure in our school district. I really want to talk about our school teams. We have amazing school teams, and I listed some. If I've left anybody out, please know that I do apologize, but our administrators, our school counselors, our ESE liaisons, our ESOL liaisons, social workers, truancy workers, and let's talk about all of our amazing teachers who are critical to the work of Project 10. The thing about Project 10 is looking at every single student across discipline areas, across areas that are important for graduation success. And they're doing that, and they're doing it an amazing job. So the next slide is going to just kind of take a closer look at a potential student, Tyler, and some of the indicators that we look at. There are many more that we look at, but we're looking at everything from the moment a child enters a high school in one of our districts that are attributable to graduation rates. So we're looking at the credits that they've earned, what their grade point averages. Those are the kind of initial things you think about with graduation success. But we're also looking at things like attendance and discipline, and determining what are the appropriate interventions that we need to put in place because there may be some obstacles there that are preventing a child from being successful. We're looking at the full systems of support that the child may need related to special programs such as an ESC program or an ELL program, or if the child needs a level of intervention. There are testing requirements that we look at. We all know that there are testing requirements related to graduation rate that we just have to make sure that our students are able to pass and given the resources that they need to do well with that. The next slide that we're going to look at is how we've done over the last 3 years. And as you can see, we have definitely grown with our graduation rate, and I can definitely say this is attributable to an amazing community that we work with, starting again with the school level teams, and of course, our teachers and our amazing students and families. So proud of the work that we've had over the last few years. We ended up last year with a 92.5% graduation rate, which rolls up to a 93%, well above the state average, which we're proud of that as well. The next slide, now I just want to pause here for a minute and make sure I'm very clear with this, is these are our projections. I talked earlier about Mr. Davidson, Rodney Davidson, in research and assessment, and how we really do rely on the amazing reporting features that he's built into our Project 10 spreadsheet that looks at the first indicator for graduation success, which is the grade point average. There are many others, which I talked about, that we look at. And so one of the things I want to emphasize on this slide is that our projection for graduation rate, it changes week to week, certainly month to month, because we're looking at the data, and as a system of supports to support the learner, we are putting in interventions. We're putting in supports for the child. So I'm really proud to report that as of this month, March of 2020-21, our projected graduation rate based on grade point average is at a 90.81%. We fully expect that to change as students continue to pass classes, as students continue to have supports for testing and all sorts of things. And as you can see, the comparison is that across through last year, we're above where we were, which is similar to other data points which you've heard this morning as well. So we're really excited about Project 10. It's something that is a highlight of our week and our day when we get to really work with our amazing teachers and our kids to help and families towards graduation success. Next, we have Kelly, we're going to introduce, who's going to speak to us from the Elementary Curriculum Department.
Thank you, Dawn. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you. Yes, I'm speaking to you today on actually behalf of all three levels so that Catherine Sue and I don't have to keep toggling with the computer up here. Let me just minimize this. What I want to do is, what I've been charged to do is, on behalf of all three of us, is to share some additional resources, some that you probably haven't seen before, that support our Sarasota County Schools Striving Reader Plan. And as you know, all of our levels have reading decision trees that have been approved by the Florida Department of Education, and those have guidance for teachers when a student has a specific deficit area. They know they can drill down with a screener or an assessment, they can find an intervention, they can look for resources and strategies and supports. So those are in our K-12 reading plan, they're available to our teachers. We also, though, have specific resources and strategies in our instructional focus guides that teachers use, the Blackboard preview courses I think we've shared with you before. And at the middle school level, they have a OneNote Striving Readers toolbox that has additional materials as well. So there are a lot of resources out there, but what I want to do today is take you just a little deeper into some of our Blackboard preview course resources that we have. I'm just going to click on third grade here, and you'll need to see this because these aren't slides. I'm going live. On the Blackboard preview courses, for example, if you look on the left, 4 boxes down, it says special populations, and I don't think this is one we shared before. So we wanted to highlight that in this area, there are a lot of resources that have been put here for these special populations. And Dr. Kingsley had mentioned that our curriculum and instructional specialists at the district level in all 3 departments and in all 3 levels and working with teachers at schools put these resources together. We also had program specialists from Pupil Support Services help, and they really contributed a lot to this section. So I especially wanted to highlight Esee and Esol today. So if we look at Esee first, it drills down to a couple different folders. You see one is differentiated strategies. That's really for all of our teachers to help any student who is struggling or needs a little extra support, a little bit of differentiation, something different. So there are a lot of resources there for all teachers. And then there are specially designed instruction strategies and resources. And it says for Esee teachers providing specially designed instruction, but this is available for all teachers. So there may be teachers who have an inclusion classroom, or they have students who are with them most of the day and with the Esee teacher part of the day. So they can also look to these resources. I wanted to click here just for a minute and highlight a couple of things. Now, there's a lot in here, so I've specifically selected a few things to share with you, so follow along. First, there's this cue card that really just tells teachers what specially designed instruction is, what it isn't, some examples, and so forth. But if we keep scrolling down, there are many other pieces. I want to scroll all the way down here. There's a resource that was put in this year especially for remote learners. So teachers can access this resource to find out about accommodations for the virtual in the virtual environment for our remote learners. So that's there. And then the other piece I wanted to really highlight was this chart, really. And if you notice where the scroll bar is, you see how much farther we have to go. So this is a really big chart. It has a lot of information in it. I've opened up the document, And now the trick will be to see if I can find it. It's here, it's here. Da, da, da. And I've scrolled to a specific page just to give an example. So it's a chart that shows where teachers can match specific accommodations or strategies to a student who has a particular deficit. And if we look at the bottom portion of this page, we can see under auditory processing, there's phonological awareness, auditory discrimination. So if that's where the teacher is seeing a student has problems, having difficulty, they can look for these observable behaviors. Maybe the student is having articulation errors, or maybe they're not hearing the sounds discretely. Well, here are the accommodations that can be considered, and here are some of those strategies they can plan for their instruction, using direct phonics and phonological awareness instruction, or teaching multi-meaning words, incorporating multisensory approaches, and so forth. So this is just one chart that kind of gets a teacher started, and if they go back to those folders, they'll see some of those other resources to help them do that. I think we shared with you once before the website too, where there are actual videos and things where teachers can see some of these things done. So I've gone back to the main page. If I click on special populations again, I get the 4 folders, and now let's click on Esol. So for our English language learners, the teachers who have students with, that English is not their first language, there are several categories of resources that they can go to here on best practices and modifications and things. I wanted to click on this general one, Esol Resources, and you see that there are about 7 documents here that they can link to. So I have a few of those opened. Again, here the trick is, can I find them now? So the first one is 7 Esol modifications and lesson plans. And again, this document just has different things teachers can do, like modeling or simplifying those instructions. This goes on and on for several pages as well, things that they can do to support their students. Another one, I'm not going to open all of them, but another one was Scaffolding Strategies. And that one is up here. Don't know why they're in different places. So one of the examples is graphic organizers. And again, this document is 19 pages. It's an excerpt from a bigger document, but it just gives different templates that teachers can use and way more instructions on how to use it and so forth that I'm not sharing with you today. The third one I wanted to show was about the Immersive Reader. The Immersive Reader program, and you all probably know about this, but our Microsoft has the Immersive Reader tool that it can be used in all of the programs that we already have, and it benefits our English language learners because it can read to them, it helps them understand and comprehend, and helps them focus their attention too. So for example, if teachers are using OneNote or if they're using a Word document, if they're using Teams or Forms, this Immersive Reader tool can be utilized to help to read aloud to students and help them with that. And this shows teachers how they can get that. And the last one I wanted to show you was there's actually this e-learning module from the Florida Department of Education. I think that one is here. If teachers want to take some professional development, learn additional pieces on effective instructional strategies and best practices for their ELLs, for their English language learners, they can even take this additional module, in addition to the courses that our district offers. But lots of resources in this Blackboard preview course under special populations. I just showed you a few. We didn't want to take up a whole lot of time with this because, as Dr. Kingsley mentioned at the beginning, we really wanted you to hear from the people who are on the front lines doing this important work. So we have 2 incredible teachers, if you guys want to come up and sit in front of one of the microphones there, to share a little bit with you today about, so what, you know, with all of this, what does this mean? How are they using it? We have Carrie Johnson, a kindergarten teacher from Fruitville, and we have Ashley Hernandez, who's a math teacher at Riverview. And did you say 12th grade? So we have kindergarten and 12th grade.
Yeah.
So we've got the whole
We're like
range
completely
today.
in two ends of the ballpark.
I don't know
here.
if we did that on purpose or not, but it's kind of nice. And they're going to just share with you, share a little bit, and talk to you a little bit about how they are doing this important work, how are they using progress monitoring data to reach their kids and respond to their students. So thank you for being here today, and go ahead.
Thank you guys. You couldn't see us smiling earlier when you were introducing us, so thank you guys for having us here today. I'll go, sure. We're friends. Outside of this, we didn't realize
Which we
were
also
both
didn't
going to
know
be
that
here
either.
today. Yeah. So I teach geometry honors, and AP statistics. So I'll just kind of talk on geometry today, since that is an FSA. We have an FSA at the end of the year, and we also have a district benchmark assessments throughout the year, which I think will tie into everything Catherine and Sue were saying. So just piggybacking on what Catherine was saying, she was, saying that teachers are able to look at the standards that their students are achieving or not achieving, and I think that's probably the biggest benefit from, in the math class we're using USA Test Prep. So looking back on our first benchmark, our midterm, and we're actually in the third round of our benchmark testing right now, so I'm actually giving that on Thursday. So we can speak on, they tell you that we're doing these, but what do we actually do with the data? It's one thing to give the benchmark test, but then for teachers, like, what do we do with it? Cool, we did the test, yay, we did what we were supposed to, what now? So for a geometry teacher, we have common planning periods, which I think is a really big benefit at Riverview High School. We meet together, so let's just say, for example, after the midterm, we met together, we went over our standards, where we were proficient, where we were not proficient. And I think it's important when I teach honors, I'm meeting with the honors teachers, because those students are at the completely different ability level than, let's say, the regular classes. And I could see that in the standards as well. I know some teachers are like, well, she's got higher scores than us. Well, it's not about us. Our students are naturally higher achievers and can absorb that information and, be at a different rigor level. So from there, like, for example, I'll give you an example. I noticed that my students were not performing on transformations. I'm not going to give you a lesson on transformations in geometry, because, like, they'd say, where we use this in everyday life. No. But my students, one of the standards was like a 40%. So that gave me a red flag. Okay, I need to go back and do something about that. And we have a instructional focus guide where we need to stay on target. We have an exam at the end of the year. So how do we as teachers integrate reteaching and remediation into an already high-paced class? So for us teachers, we're just trying to find creative ways to reteach any standards that are not proficient. So for that, we've created bell work packets that we'll do at the beginning of class every day, where we're really diving into any standards, again, that they were lacking in. And as a whole, I'll just say, because we all know how last year ended, I'm already finding, without the benchmark assessments, I'm finding other areas that they are lacking in. I'm trying to teach something with simplifying radicals, and they don't know how to simplify a radical because it's something that, maybe they had to teach themselves at the end of the school year last year or something like that. So again, we're trying to find creative ways. I know we use iExcel, we use Big Ideas, which is our homework textbook platform that does really great differentiation, and just finding activities that are socially distant, and the remote kids too. I mean, that's a completely another side of the story. How are we, reteaching our remote students? And do you have a lot of remote kids?
Not anymore. They're all back now.
They are. Mm-hmm. Congratulations.
Thank you. And my world is very different. I do not use the word radicals in kindergarten. But something that we do is we do a lot of small group. I feel small group is the most beneficial, effective way to quickly see where students are, what they're struggling with, and be able to provide that instant, appropriate feedback with instruction. Something a colleague and I did this year to help the kindergarten team be on the same page was to create standards-based assessments on a program that's called ESGI. It's an online tool. And we went through all of the reading and math standards and created assessments that the entire team uses. And it really helps just provide effective conversation among all of us. And we can look quickly and see who is the lowest 25% among the team, what is working. Teachers, they're so creative, and we have so many wonderful teachers that can say, okay, so this student is struggling here, and this is what I'm doing to help. And it just, teachers bounce off ideas and create great interventions or great feedback to enhance their lesson and help students become more successful. So I think that's been the most effective, is just having meaningful conversations among all of us using common data. But I have spoken with other kindergarten teachers at other schools, and I do notice that just across the district, we're not all on the same page. And that is something that I think would be helpful, where if a student transfers from one school to another, we can have common data and not say, well, wait, why did this teacher give this student a score that I don't agree with? So that would be something that I think we could work on just at the district level, I guess, just to get all teachers on the same page. But as far as me and using data, I would say a lot of collaboration and a lot of small group is what I find most helpful.
Collaboration between the teachers.
Oh, absolutely. And
key.
that's something that's been hard to, not all teachers are willing to have those conversations. So that's been
Yes.
a goal of mine, to try to get everybody on the same page.
So.
Ms. Ziegler?
Well, thank you for being here. Reagan says hello, by the way. I'm so excited. She was my daughter's kindergarten teacher, and I have nothing but amazing things to say, so I'm very excited to see you here.
Thank you.
But something that you mentioned that I think is really strong, powerful, and it came across in some of the other discussions, but it's that peer-to-peer strategies. And I know in my own profession, I think that really is powerful. Well, it's not just, for lack of a better term, it's top down, but it's people who are in it, who are doing
Absolutely.
it. You're speaking that same language, and it's just empowering. So one of my questions was, and I think Mrs. Johnson, you referenced it, is that you create those assessments yourself, so it's not somewhere else. Is that consistent across the board in the district? I'm looking over here. Yes. No.
I'll just address it a little bit. I know I think you joined our math group that evening too, the math team leaders. We've been having this year our 2 math specialists. One is on leave, but we've contracted her a little bit. They meet with our elementary team leaders about once a month. K1, actually by grade level. They meet 6 times by grade level, and for all kindergarten teachers, lead teachers across the district. So from all the schools, that's where you got with all the teachers. And that's where this came up, these common assessments. And so they started spreading. So more and more want that. And so that's kind of our plan moving forward. We have some common assessments built in the math IFG instructional focus guide now. So it's a matter of making sure all teachers are accessing those and using those. But some of, I think, what you're talking about are smaller assessments where you're just checking little bits along the way, and that's where we want to move to. In science, we have 3rd, 4th, and 5th common assessments right now. So,
And those are created by the team. That's what I'm saying. Are we buying them? Are they off the shelf from like one of our
Yeah,
providers or
so
vendors, or they're created internally?
the science ones have been internally with the science specialists and other teachers, and I believe with that program you're using, you're using a program, but it's still you all choosing the standards and the questions and all that, right?
Right.
Which I love. I mean, I think
Yeah.
the buy-in is almost just organic at that point. So that was part of it.
And then for future, just FYI, we're working on our K-12 reading plan right now, collectively, all 3 levels, that will be due soon, and it'll be for next year. And because we'll have new standards and new materials, new curriculum, it's a great opportunity. Our team has been working really hard at what those common assessments can be.
Thank you. Well, and then one of my follow-ups, and I had a couple questions, but I'll direct them right now. But I'm mentioning that, for example, when you do those assessments, and you use the example where you saw there was a certain lesson plan that students that were below where you expected, and again, looking at the circumstances last year would have been a major disruptor. So
Right.
outside of the anomaly of this year, or this last 12 months, if you will, when you do find that there is kind of an area, lesson that's lacking, do you share with your peers? Is because perhaps I don't know if it's the approach or if it's the content, and
Right.
so
and that's
so
the
for
question
next year.
too. We ask ourselves, like, did I teach it better? No,
Yeah.
we never say that. But we have professional learning communities, so when we do meet, that is something we look, geometry honors to see that, and then the regular level, and then across the school, across the district. So I mean, it's trial and error basically for us. Like Carrie was saying, we'll try a new approach, we'll try a new activity, we'll try something new to see if that increases our proficiency. We typically have, like that chapter I was talking about is a lower scoring chapter because it's really abstract, and so some kids just don't have that abstract mind, so we have to find other ways to try to get them there. So.
And one final question, because I know I'm sure my other board members want to say something, but and this may be for Dr. Cantalupo, but when you mentioned the dashboards, which I love, and I'm so excited that we have them, and I know we've mentioned this in the past, when we go down to the student level or the classroom level, we have certain students that are in district who have moved from school to school, but we also certainly have a number of who either come from a charter school, a private school, or out of state or county. Are we able to capture, I mean, I know there's basic records that we retain, but are we able to successfully get all that information loaded in so that those teachers are able to access their past academic history?
Here she comes.
I was going to ask you when you were sitting here, but we kept going.
Well, the short answer is yes, because we upload nightly. So as soon as a child is registered, that will then filter through the system and go directly to all the way down from the school to the teacher level. The caveat to that is that if we don't have all the data, we may not. So if a kid is obviously from a different state and we don't have the test scores, but as soon as they come in and a teacher or a school sees they're missing something, sometimes the school does a record request from the receiving school, and then the data is put in. But as soon as they're in our SIS system, they filter through the dashboards.
Okay, thank you. And have you guys found, I know for kindergarten it might be a little different because unless there's probably not as much history that they're coming with.
Right.
But are you finding those
Yeah.
helpful when you are really narrowing in on specific students where they're struggling?
Well, specifically this year too, because we didn't have FSA scores from 8th grade because I teach 9th grade as well as 12th grade. But seeing those kids from previous years, not just COVID year, was very helpful. So you can see in the honors course, I mean, they're there, but some of them should not have been placed in there based on what their FSA scores probably would have been. So it's nice to kind of see what kids I need to target to, differentiate the different lessons. So.
Well, I would be remiss if I did not thank you from the bottom of my heart for everything that you guys have done and all of the teachers in this district in a remarkable year. So thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Carrie, did you have anything to add about data coming in before kindergarten?
Well, like she said, we don't have as much data coming in. We do a summer screening, so we can try to gather as much information to get a good picture on each student. And that is helpful, but we don't have as much.
Karen?
I want to recognize the two teachers, Carrie Johnson and Ashley Fernandez, for sharing the real work that goes on in your classroom. Very well done, thank you. And also recognize the curriculum departments and our district leaders for the resources are phenomenal, and I really liked the piece on process testing that Ms. Ellington presented. And my question relative to that is how accessible is testing to find out any processing challenges, whether they be visual or auditory, that students have? The resources are rich. How do we know, and how accessible are those assessments?
So the resources that we have, whether it's Blackboard preview courses or instructional focus guide or the decision trees that are also located for elementary, we have that elementary website as well that has all those resources there. All of that is available to all of our students. And when we've done our PLCs or we call them CPTs, those collaborative planning times with grade levels where we've gone out to all the schools, we'll show, we'll make sure folks know where those are. We've also worked with the pupil support department because they'll have more specific kinds of screeners and assessments and things like that for, and as they work with their Swiss teams, their school-wide support teams, and identifying, is there more needed in addition to, as a teacher, I'm going to utilize some of these resources and differentiate or target or provide an intervention or two. But when it gets at a higher level than that, then it's going to take a school-wide support team to really analyze, and that's where all the players come. And that's when probably other screeners or assessments might be mentioned or offered.
Thank you. I think that, everything that's collectively been presented today just points to the importance of when we get to the planning time for teachers and giving it the highest priority, because the resources are phenomenal. And you can see that once you peel away all the layers and dig deeper into those, it's going to take a tremendous amount of time. So I'd just like to be a strong advocate for the amount of teacher planning. We seem to have decreased it through the years, and look at the value of it in not only the amount of planning time, but the accessibility to content-alike areas, as you've mentioned, to share the successes. And just one last piece, and an advocacy for kindergarten, and really focusing our resources on those early learners to close that gap as soon as possible, so that by the time they get into that 9th grade math classroom and 12th grade classroom, that we've really grown our ability to have students at grade level. But thank you to all of you very much.
Tom Edwards?
Hey, good morning. Let me also start by saying congratulations, Carrie.
Thank you. Thank you.
So first time I've had a chance to see you, and I wanted to wish you that well-deserved.
Thank you.
This also for me, I noticed, and I don't know that it was given the right attention, but the iReady data results from spring to winter, or from fall to winter, that leap was pretty significant. And I want to acknowledge that letting us see how that happened and see all the work that goes on behind the scenes and to say thank you, and certainly shows in our results of how we stack up against the state. So having the opportunity to see how it actually is done is great. So thank you for that. One question that I do have is that I'm looking at, from kindergarten to 12th grade, I'm looking at schools, each school being different, all of the processes, subject matter, all of the different opportunities that you guys have in that very rich database for folks to get resources. That's enormous. It's huge. What an accomplishment. But what I would be questioning now is, do you have a way to capture its usage? Do you see where what data is being accessed, and perhaps trying to get an understanding as to why?
I glanced over at Denise to see if she would pop up. I'm not sure. I think IT can look at some of the pieces for us and run reports. They've done it with other things before. At elementary anyway, we started at the beginning of the year. We were going to ask to see how many elementary teachers are accessing the Blackboard preview courses, because we started the year, the intent was really just to go a few weeks in to give teachers a little bit of a head start because of the concurrent teaching and all that was happening. Middle and high kind of went that way and went with the original plan. At elementary, we continued because most of our teachers are teaching all subjects. So we felt we were getting responses from them that they still wanted and needed the support. But while everyone's working on and doing a different way of work up here now, their focus is on this now, different than other things, you kind of wonder, is it being utilized? And so while we didn't get any IT reports, we did from our teacher response. We always tease that we're like 10 minutes ahead of the teachers, that because there's so much work. And so an email like, when's it coming out, or we're ready, so we are getting a lot of positive. I don't know the exact, we did a survey too, and it was a real pretty high number, like maybe 60% 70% are using it. We think it's grown as the year's gone on too. So at first, not a lot of people were, because they were unsure, that everybody was just trying to get their feet under them, at the beginning of the year. But at elementary, people are using those Blackboard preview courses really well, I think. Well,
I just listened to what Carrie said about peer-to-peer. What trends can we capture there might be interesting. And plus, to what Ms. Rose says about just the time, that it would take to kind of look at the data that, maybe these are the top 5 things you might want to look at. I don't know. But I love that we have that data that we have 77% of our families use the portal. I love that. That number means so much to me. So I just throw that out there. And the dashboard, all that information that's on a dashboard, I do as much as I can to prepare for a meeting. I can't imagine what it'd be like for a teacher to have all that information available to you, to know the students that you're getting ahead of time, and that's awesome. So well done, everyone.
I have a few comments on, how many teachers can use it and where else do the teachers need help. And I know they need some help so that they can access these things and be taught on them. And I don't know if maybe using some of our funds that we're getting in this second round might be well spent on perhaps hiring aides at the schools so that somebody is watching the class so the group of teachers can take these lessons. Or the other thing is, and I know that because we've got Rotaries and other organizations out there that want to adopt a class or adopt a school. And I know that sometimes, back when the days when I volunteered in the schools, sometimes I'd go and the teacher didn't know quite what to do with me. But I was making popcorn sometimes. But perhaps use these volunteers to maybe read to the class rather than read one-on-one with a child where you're not really getting much feedback. Maybe have that volunteer step in and help manage the class while they're doing a lesson that you've set up so that the teacher has time to work one-on-one with their small group so that they can see where they are, so, to think better about how we can use our volunteers and or paid aides, because some schools can't get the volunteers. And I think that's something that, I'm getting some nods. I'm hoping that, because I think we need to think about that. We've got that resource here. We've got organizations that want to come in and volunteer in our classrooms, and how best can we do that? And to me, I think if teachers can come up with thoughts on how they can use a volunteer so that they have the time to go one-on-one. And I know, you have to have a volunteer that comes in on a regular basis and all of that in order to do that. So I think that's important. But I think another partner we have in this is parents. And to make sure that the parents know what they can do with these children. We've got a nice bag that goes out. I think the Rotary Club does it for kids coming into kindergarten. And there's alphabet cards. There's all kinds of wonderful things in there. But if the parents don't know how to use it, it's difficult. And I think that's even more problematic when you have a parent that doesn't speak English. And I think that maybe we need to be looking at ways to help our teachers and school communicate with these parents so that we can close that gap. A friend of mine wasn't volunteering because I think it was part of her graduation requirements for her college courses that she had to volunteer at the school. Not volunteer, she worked. And because she was bilingual, she was shocked at how many parents called that school that didn't speak English. And I'm like, well, what do we do at other schools when the parent calls in and has questions about what should I do or where can I get information on this? So I'm thinking, we might want to be looking at bilingual aides or helpers or something at some of our schools so that parents can communicate. I don't know if you all have problems communicating with some parents who don't speak English, because that's a connection we need to make sure we aren't missing. So I'm glad to see that. And, because we're going to be thinking about how we're going to use these dollars, and they have to be used in non-recurring ways, meaning it's for this coming year and that's it. So we're looking at that. And I think probably to Laura, well, I'll come back for my other questions after the other ones have a chance to go around. Bridget?
Oh, okay. So one question, and Mrs. Brownie brought this up, and I'm glad you did. I have a couple, but are volunteers allowed back into the schools yet? I did not think so.
Not this year.
And I think you raise a really good point, because I've certainly heard from people in the community, especially as more and more, we have a large retirement population and they're getting their vaccinations. They are excited and eager to come back and help. And I also do think that there's an element of management that can be very we recognize and appreciate it, but sometimes it can be burdensome. I just can't think of a better word to use. And so, navigating that, I think that having that autonomy at the local, the school and classroom levels is critical. But that being said, I wanted to clarify on the volunteers. But one thing that, and Mrs. Rose brought this up, and I think this is so important. I love all the resources we have, but again, I go to that timing, and I think to myself, having that ability to, because people learn in different ways. So sometimes you're a self-learner and you're going to research it, and then other people aren't as, they don't love the digital stuff, but that's where I think that peer-to-peer comes into place. But do you feel, and this is probably a loaded question, but do you feel that you have enough time, even though I know it's the most precious resource, to really access some of these items? Because I think we have a ton, but do you feel that you do in fact have the ability and time to access the resources or create new ones?
Well, time is always a gift.
Right.
And we are so fortunate to have so many resources, but it is very overwhelming. Which resource do I access? What do I want to focus on? What's the most beneficial? So I think time is great, but it is a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
Same.
I mean, the dashboard alone, it's amazing. But the time it took me to go through each kid, and it's not the dashboard's fault, it's a lot of work, you know?
Absolutely.
When you teach high school, it's 150 kids that you have to go through and see what their scores are, and it's a lot of time. The same with ESE accommodations and Esol and contacting parents, just the high school alone, it's just a lot. So time would be everything.
And that's what I said. It's a loaded question because time is the most precious resource. But to Mr. Edwards' point, which I think you made a very good one, is not so much. I think if there was a way from an IT standpoint or from the data analytics aspect of not just the broad utilization, but what is being utilized, because that could then from there trickle down to that discussion with your peers at the classroom of, hey, I use this, and instead of having to navigate it, it may be more quick to respond to them, and that may cut some of the time out. And I just thought that was a good point.
We've had to do that a lot this year. Hey, this is what I'm doing in Teams. It works really good. Or, I think, especially at Riverview, we've done a really great job at collaborating technology this year. Like, hey, I'm going to do a quick Teams meeting. Come in my room. And anybody that wants to will come in here, and I'll show them Blackboard. I was part of the Blackboard preview creators for the high school math classes, and I know really valuable and amazing teachers created that, and I made sure all my teachers at my school knew how great it was and was able to share all of that with them, and they appreciated that. So.
And do you feel like and I know from my experience at the end of last year, you did an amazing job for the parent side, because all of everyone was like, oh my God, what are we doing?
Gosh. I'm not a homeschool teacher.
Exactly. I hear every day how many people are like, I have a newfound appreciation for teachers, and I said amen. So, but with that, some of the good things that came out of COVID, if they're, as we reflect on it, is utilizing those videos or different communication mechanisms to get in touch with students and the families. Are you finding that that's being continued to use? Do you have enough support, resources, time to be able to do those?
I feel like just having the ability to contact parents through Zoom, I've had more conferences this year than I ever have because it's accessible and it's quick. So yes, I think that's been fantastic. Creating YouTube videos for parents, giving them tips and what to do at home.
Yes.
Here's something that we're working on this week. Here's how you can reinforce it at home. There's the video, and it's all right at their hands. So I think being creative and using what we have.
Is that something we see across the board that's utilized?
Absolutely. Even my open house was on Zoom. Like, I just Zoom recorded it, and if you didn't, there it is.
Watch it at any time.
Yeah, it's amazing.
As a parent, I thought that's a game changer. So I think that's something that we can continue. So,
Thank you
again.
Jane?
Well, I want to thank both of you for being here today and for the job that you're doing, because I know it's not easy. And this year in particular is like no other we've ever seen. But you're on the opposite ends of the spectrum. In kindergarten, I want you to look to next year, because it's going to be different, because we have students that we haven't found. And how does that come into this equation? And that's going to be problematic, I'm sure. But we have kids that, are not in kindergarten. Some of them maybe not in first grade that we haven't found or haven't come back, and will they come back, and what status will that and how will that impact our classes? I know the Early Learning Coalition in Tallahassee is looking very closely at legislation which will start doing more progress monitoring and testing of students in the pre-K grade. And I'm not so sure I'm in favor of that, but it's not really my decision, is it? So I think those are things that we need to look at on the horizon, is how will this legislative session impact our kindergarten students? And how many will we have coming back? How many will be with us? And that whole impact, I think, could be substantial. On the high school end, I'm most concerned about those general population students, the ones that don't have a 2.0 average at Riverview High School, that aren't in the band and aren't in extracurricular activities, and don't have the wherewithal to stay after school and be involved in the school itself, as other students do, as my grandson did when he was a Riverview student last year, before he graduated at a strange year.
Yeah, it was.
But I'm very concerned about these students that perhaps we're missing, and their mental health. And just as important as all of these academics things are, folks, the most important thing for me right now is mental health. And I think we see it in this country. We see it with the horrific situations that happened in Atlanta and in Boulder. We see it at the fairground last Saturday night. And that's a very bad extreme, but our kids, do they know how to get mental health help? I'm hearing around the state that a lot of kids don't. They're not going to ask for help, generally speaking, and they can't learn if they are upset. They can't learn if they're traumatized. So you're dealing not only with the academics of these students, but with the whole child. And oftentimes these are things that are really tough for you. So
Yeah.
my heart goes out to you. I thank you so much. We support you greatly, but I think we have to look at the management, the people in the curriculum department have to look at this as being an integral part of what we're going to be doing in the future, because I think this impacts us in a big way, whether we are identifying it as such, but we've got to get control of some of these issues, some of these emotional issues with our students and families. That's why I'm so interested in seeing our county do more in mental health, hint, hint. But I just know that you have a big job, and it's been impacted by this pandemic in an even greater way. So thank you for being a teacher. It's one of the most important things and important professions that anyone could have. I think it's the greatest profession, but thank you both for being here today
Thank you.
and for being in those classrooms.
Thank you. We're smiling. We're smiling.
Dr. Asplin?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to also say thank you for coming today and sharing. We really appreciate it. I know you both are amazing teachers, and I know that you know this, but beyond the programs, we have great programs. We have great pacing guides, fantastic curriculum department, all of these things. And then at the end of the day, it's about the teacher who's there with the student and what happens. And you have to have an amazing teacher in there with your students, and you two are amazing. And I haven't been in your class yet, Ashley, I don't believe. I
Well,
know
you're
I've been
welcome
in your
anytime.
class a couple times, Carrie. And I do want to say, Carrie, that I am very impressed with what you do. And when you were talking about the PLC piece, the Professional Learning Communities piece, and I know you talked about it as well, Ashley, I was very impressed with you, because I think that you and your team are the epitome of a great PLC, in that not only are you talking about best practices and common assessment and analyzing the data. From what I understand, when we talked, every few days you utilize that data and drill all the way down to each of your student for that personalized learning and restructure your small groups. And then the teachers actually could possibly share students depending on the standards that they are teaching that day. So it's not just your students every day that you're with, you're helping each other with students who might have different needs depending on the data that you looked at every other day. And to really look at it that much and restructure your groupings that much and personalize the way you do, your students, I'm sure, are learning tremendously, and I'm sure your parents are very appreciative. So great job.
Thank you. That's so nice of you to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to reinforce Mrs. Goodwin's point that we do need to prioritize and conquer the mental health challenges before we can even get to the most success with the learning piece. But in addition to that, our students that have arrived in high school and aren't able to, and have the challenge of exceeding a 2.0 grade point average, it's so high quality to hear from teachers that as you've come forth and what you need and what you are doing, it would be great to hear from those high school teachers that have that challenge of students that aren't able to go beyond a 2.0. And in addition to that, what kind of resources do those teachers need? And where does access to career course options come into play? Barriers, resources. I know that our curriculum department has a tremendous amount of resources, but the value of hearing from actual teachers is really high quality for me. And thank you again, and thank you to our curriculum and district folks as well.
I think my comment would be directed either to Steve or Chris or perhaps Laura. When we evaluate teachers, we is the big one, not me. I don't do any of it. When you evaluate the teachers or your staff, do they look at which teachers are using the dashboard data, which teachers are using these resources, and is that part of their grade? Because, I mean, you know, I would like to think that all of our highly effective teachers are using all of these things, and that if somebody, because I know there's some teachers that, I mean, 10 years ago, they didn't want to touch the computers, but, you know, I would think they all do now, I would hope, and use our data. So is that part of their grade?
Yes, there's an indicator on the Pride evaluation form that is all about how teachers use their data, and these two probably have the highest scores in that area. So it's definitely something that administrators look for when they go into classrooms. The other brilliant thing that these curriculum directors have done is making sure that team leaders are accessing training on these resources. And if you think about that, the team leader then goes back and works with their PLC. And so everyone benefits by looking at data and common assessment building and looking at the resources because the team leader is there getting that information. So we can't always reach every teacher, but that has been a brilliant strategy that our directors have used.
Great. And directed to you or any of the others, what would you like us to focus on if we had a pot of money that we could invest in something next year?
Go ahead, ask for it.
I mean, at the high school level, I don't see volunteers like ever. I really don't. Like there's no volunteers in the classroom whatsoever, at least for me. I know at the elementary level it's so different because parents want to volunteer all the time. I mean, I'm a parent. My daughters go to Philippi Shores, and I want to go volunteer as much as I can. And we don't. I just, besides our IB parent organization, which is absolutely amazing, but like you were saying, the other, 80% of our population, volunteers would be great. I know that talking about the 2.0 students, we do a great job tracking. I would love all of our students to not be remote. That's personally, 60 of my students are remote. The rest are in class. It's been a huge struggle this year, as you guys know. So
perhaps
school level,
not a volunteer, but an aide, paid aide that you could be telling what to do might be more helpful for you.
Yeah, I would love to do small groups within my 45-minute class period, but
You can't.
we do activities and I can pinpoint some kids, but I don't have time in my 45 minutes with those kids to do small groups and pull people, and that's the high school level though. So
Saturday school?
oh.
Yeah, because that's the other thing. You know, would these kids even come to Saturday school, the ones who really need it?
As a teaching, like, or discipline, because we have discipline Saturday school, but you mean reinforcing and tutoring, and I'm not sure if our lower level kids would come on a Saturday if we can't get them to come Monday through Friday, you know.
Right, yeah, because a lot of them aren't there every day.
But again, the remote situation, I mean, we need our kids back in the class so I'm there with them. I mean, the screen is great, but when I can reach out and say, hey, I'm so glad you're here today, I mean, it just makes such a difference in their lives. I had 2 kids come back from remote yesterday, and I was so excited, and to see their face and to see them up close, and they were working so hard. I mean, it's really hard to monitor your kids in class and reach the kids that are at home. I mean, it's just...
And I think that also goes along with the mental health.
Absolutely.
Piece.
That's exactly what I was
had one that
thinking.
was remote for 2 weeks. And,
Ashley, you've got our attention, and if you come up with some ideas in the next couple of weeks, just send it to the board members at the school or Dr. Brennan. We will listen.
Okay.
Carrie?
No, I was just saying that goes along with that mental health piece. Kids need to be in school and socializing and being part of something instead. They're not meant to sit and look at a screen.
So perhaps another social worker at the school that would go out to the families? Or counselors in the school that would help the kids when they're there?
I mean, another counselor would be great at Riverview with 2,600 kids. I know it's overwhelming for them as well. I mean, just hands-on people at the school trying to track down students and I just think we just need, I don't know specifically what more support we need, but at our large high school, I mean, every extra person would be great. But I'll brainstorm some more. But
well, you
like
perhaps with your administration.
I'll go talk to Steve. I'll see what he wants me to do.
Thank you. Karen, did I call on you and I didn't move it?
Thank you.
Karen?
Madam Chair, you did call on me. Thank you.
Okay. Bridget?
Well, I think we may have just touched on it. I just wrote this down, put my cue to ask this question, and was going to say, what is your biggest takeaway of challenges that you have seen this year? And I know you just mentioned concurrence, you can certainly say that. And I know the mental health component that very much plays into just the lack of personal human interaction that breaks my heart. And I'm so glad that compared to other states that we have such a high percentage that have been, I mean, there are kids who have been in school the entire year. It kills me.
I'm thankful to be back
But I know
to school.
that with here, it's still been a huge challenge. So even if it's academic or it's mental health, like if you think of days you came home and you're just, compared to last year, and again, I know this is a different year, but it did reset a lot of things for us. What kind of feedback would you give us, or what are your takeaways?
No,
That's a hard one.
I mean, I'm still just as exhausted as I was last year, I'll be honest. And I'm thankful I'm actually teaching the same courses I taught last year, so the prep work that goes into it was not nearly as difficult as other teachers were that I know, especially the ones that have never been on Blackboard in their entire life. But I don't.
Maybe I'll making it more looking forward, because perhaps perhaps it's just about really having those kids back in class. But as we learned from this year, what are like some of the challenges you foresee potentially moving into next year that we can be prepared from a resource?
I mean, academically, my remote students are underperforming my brick and mortar students. I've been doing data on that through my leadership academy that I'm in, and just pulling data from remote versus brick and mortar students. I just think I'm waiting to see their FSA scores for geometry to see really the data in that. That's really what I'm looking forward to see. And I think a lot of those remote kids might have to do some extra prep work to prepare for, let's say they want to go into Algebra 2 next year. Like, I don't know if they'll be prepared. You know, they may be watching me on the screen and they do okay on the tests, but compared to my other students, they are underperforming.
Thank you.
So.
No, that's good feedback.
Well, I know that on the state level, the PTA organization, the Superintendent's Association, and the Florida School Board Association, we're all partnering together to send out, I think the superintendents will be sending out a survey talking about absentee rates again. Because I think just as we have these kids that are still remote, we have a lot of kids that are absent more. And so we're going to be sending that out, and hopefully the districts will return that, and we will design some type of a new campaign for next year that will, as we did a few years ago. You remember, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we had the great emphasis on absentee rates, both students and teachers, actually. But we're hoping to design a campaign around that for next year. And I think you got to be there. You got to be there to play, and you got to be there to learn. And just as you're saying, the remote is, everybody is probably not tuning in at the same level that they do in class. I know my granddaughter at Pineview has been quarantined a couple of times this year, and it really, she's not happy about being home. But I really think that absenteeism is on the rise, and we really have to look at that and nip that in the bud. So, Dr. Asplin, when you get that survey, and I don't know when it'll come out, but I know that the Superintendent's Association will be sending it out shortly. I hope all the districts will fill that out and send that in so that we can see what it is now, what the absentee rate is, and see if we can't design a campaign around promoting being at school.
I had one comment on the higher graduation. It looked like we really jumped up this last year for graduation, but didn't they waive a few of the requirements for graduation this year? And I'm not, well, by this year I meant last fall, and last spring. And I don't know if they'll be waived again this year, but I doubt that they will. So I'm like, I'm not going to be upset if we drop 1 or 2 points in our graduation rates. I'll be really excited if we hold
I'm
out.
going to be upset if we drop, but I will say there was, the assessment piece was waived. What we do know last year, we know what the data, very specifically what the data looked like for the number of students who benefited from what they were calling a COVID diploma. But what we also know is when you look at that last quarter of the year, when we had so many, the challenges that we faced that last quarter, it's that, as Dawn did a great, Dr. Clayton did a great job of presenting the information. We have it down student by student by student. We meet with schools on a regular basis. They have their teams that are monitoring those students. We would have picked up a large number of those students anyway. But the fact of the matter is, once the assessment was out the window, those students graduated without it, whether it's through a what? Yeah, the number was 160 students that benefited. Think of the thousands of students, 160 students that benefited from that COVID diploma. But I guess my point is that a lot of those students we know we would have picked up. And when you think about it, we take these students, the seniors who are still grinding it out one by one by one. We know those students. We know them by name. The schools know them very intimately. And at the end of the day, we take them all the way through July. We have that window through July where we work with students. We fund a summer program for those seniors. And it's pretty neat. I talk about graduating students from jail. I talk about graduating students in a number of different issues. Last year we saw an issue with one of our Hispanic population. We put a real emphasis on that this year for our graduation rate. So the data, looking at the data, making sure that we are reacting to the data, I think we do a great job. And I want to just say that Dawn and Lisa here, as we have worked this and really put the processes in place, to have that kind of support for the secondary schools. And we are down in the middle schools now monitoring that graduation rate. They do a great job supporting the schools, guiding the schools through the data. And, that's one graduation rate. You can really watch the data kind of come to life. And at the end of the year, you celebrate those kids when the ACT test comes in, the SAT concordance scores come in. We do testing for the last 2 years at the school site where we didn't used to do that with SAT and ACT. So We have a number of strategies. I can't imagine anybody doing more than what we do. And our goal is to get to 100%. Maybe one of these days we will, but we're going to continue working to that. But I do want to give them credit. They do a great job.
Not to put you on the spot or anything. Bright Futures, they're looking at some changes to that. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, I do know, I just saw yesterday there was something that came out on it. I don't have the specifics, and I don't want to speak to the specifics of it because I don't want to confuse people. I do know that they're looking at, I think the financial burden, lessening the financial burden on the state as far as how much money is going out for Bright Futures. That's always unfortunate for our students who work hard over the years to prepare for that. So yes, there is changes in the works. It's not finalized yet, but we are anticipating some changes. And when we get those changes, we'll be communicating that very quickly.
And that's for a few years out, though.
Yeah.
But currently,
Correct.
you're working with the students to help them get Bright Futures?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank
We
you.
have a number of opportunities for students to prep and prepare for, assessments.
And they can all work with your staff at each of the schools. You work with them to get all types of
I think our
scholarships that are
career centers
available.
are instrumental in that, and all the high schools now, the career advisors at the middle school are a piece that were added a few years ago, and it kind of feeds into our career centers at the school. We're getting better and better with that process, working with Education Foundation as well as working with Rotary Futures in Venice, as well as working with, Lim Andrews at Booker High School. I promise you.
So we work with the kids not just through K through 12, but we're looking at in the preschool areas. We're working with some of those, and we're also working to make sure that they're successful beyond high school.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Asplin, I know you're looking at some things, already on way to do this. We've got few minutes left. Do you want to share any of the thoughts that you've got on some of the things we can do to close this gap, or that you're thinking of?
So as far as the achievement gap is concerned, what you said earlier about starting early, pre-K, K, trying to make sure that we close that gap right off the bat is very, very important. One thing that we've noticed in looking at our trends over the last 5 years, for instance, is that gap is there 5 years ago, and it's the same gap all the way through. And even when you look at the state's data, same thing. The gap is right there. It's hard to close that gap. Everybody is moving forward with proficiency, but the gap's not changing. So we need to close it right off the bat with pre-K and K the best that we can. Very, very important. I think another piece to it is, especially when we move into the third grade and above, building those relationships so students are engaged, I think is very, very important. And I know this summer our principals are going through something called Capturing Kids' Hearts for 2 days. And that really speaks to how to build quality relationships with your students and with the families. And we're hoping then the principals will then take that back to their schools with their faculties, because I think as we and then you also put in there the equity committee that we just created, our equity and innovation person, Dr. Moore. Part of that committee is to help us to close the achievement gap. And how do you do that? And it's back to that building relationships. Well, how do you do that? We have to understand culture and environment and background and the family, so that people will trust you as a teacher and as an educator, so that they will then become engaged in your classroom and they will learn that way. And so I think that's very important. And then the third thing I think is back to what we were saying before. I think that the professional learning community piece is very, very important, and our teachers, having them collaborate and have time. We already said that a couple times, have time to collaborate together to build those formative assessments, common assessments, be able to analyze the data together, talk about their students individually, regroup, but have those small groups, that small group instruction, or even that one-on-one. That is the best way to improve a student's skills. And so I think, we need to look at all those areas. And we have some professional development, like I said, in those areas. And then going into our strategic plan, as we are right now starting to build our strategic plan, it's going to be very important for us to look at the early childhood piece and what are we going to do with that? So.
The summer school this year will have, but we won't have the test scores back in time, but we're going to use this progress monitoring. We still have the information to
Right.
assign schools.
That's correct. I don't believe we're going to have test scores back by the time we have summer school. I think test scores are supposed to be required to be back by July 31st maybe, and summer school is going to occur 2 weeks prior to the 4th of July week and 2 weeks after the 4th of July week. So we will use our progress monitoring data and our teacher data, report card data, all the data that we use every day to inform our instruction. That's what we will use to find the students who we think really could benefit from summer school.
Tom?
So I love the fact that we were talking and just sort of all amongst ourselves, mental health still kept being a common thread. And it's interesting, too, to really assess that achievement gap data and the trend as it relates to how we compare to the state. And we're not able to bump those numbers a whole lot. And my only, because we started this mental health conversation at our last workshop, just to make the awareness. And I know that our county commissioners are going to be talking about that today. But I noticed in Governor DeSantis, he has $79 billion moved over to behavioral programs, which I'm going to ask Mitzi when we see her this afternoon in the operational budget as a side note to see if any of those dollars can be earmarked, because look at what we do from a curriculum standpoint. Look at what we do with resources and all of these kinds of things to try and address the achievement gap. And I can only assume that mental health, it has to be a common thread. We can't address inequity. We can't address achievement gap if we're really not getting a better focus on the mental health piece of it. So I'm hoping that when we do our strategic plan, that becomes an area, particularly on the VPK on our elementary students, to make it more matter of fact, so that by the time they're in high school, it's common conversation.
Any more comments on this? Before we, again, we want to thank all of you for bringing us this information and showing us how hard you work and the collaborative way that you work to really, really provide an excellent education for our students. And hopefully we can, provide some additional services for you in this next coming year. There's only so many hours in a day.
Yeah.
So many days in a week.
Thank you for the extra days we've had, though, this year. We've appreciated those.
Yeah, if we could pull more, because knowing it doesn't matter how many hours you have in the day. If we gave you a 26-hour day, you'd still be spending more time. You would never have enough time to get done what you need to get done, because you'd find more things to do.
Right.
I know that's how you are. But we'll do what we can to help you with this burden in closing that gap. And all of you for putting all this data together and the information together. We really appreciate all of you and all of our staff out there for what they do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
And we will have a lunch break and we will reconvene at 1 o'clock.